Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the home of Unitarian Universalism in Central Washington. My name is Rita Salama, and I serve on the CUUF Board of Trustees, the worship team, and a few other things. I'm also the celebrant for today's service. Our minister is Reverend Thomas Perchlick, but the first Sunday of every month is the lay-led service. Our worship theme for this month is generosity, one of the 6 of our UU values, which are all centered in love. If you are a visitor this morning, we are so glad you are here, and we hope that you experience our generosity. We welcome every person of goodwill, just as you are, whatever body you inhabit, whomever you love, whatever your age, you are welcome here. We invite everyone to join us for coffee and treats and conversation after the service, both in person or on Zoom. For the folks on Zoom, you'll find the order of service in the chat. For everyone here in our building, let's welcome those people on Zoom. If you'll turn the cameras right above the exit sign. And I can tell you, having participated on Zoom, it makes a difference when we welcome people. It does. And now please take a moment to greet those around you today, especially somebody that you don't know well. Conversations to be followed during coffee time. So I have a few announcements for you. Today, right after the service, or I should say 15 minutes after the service, or at noon, whichever is earliest, there is a meeting with CUUF's new building task force. Now, the reason that we need to be mindful of the time is that there is a immigrant support rally at 1 o'clock at Memorial Park. So that's why we need to do that. We're going to meet with the new building task force, and an advisory vote, that would mean from you, will be taken on how we would like them to proceed, whether that's building or relocating for our new church home when the highway comes through and takes this building. So please stay for that. Another announcement is that we are a caring community, especially when someone needs help. In the announcements, the ones that were emailed out, there's a link to Lots of Helping Hands. You can click on it and sign up to be available when help is needed. It only takes a few minutes. Next Sunday is the February Share the Plate. Our recipient will be the Women's Resource Center, so bring your checkbooks or your cash. And then if you would like to know more about this congregation, maybe you're thinking of joining, there is a Path to Involvement class that's a week from Saturday on the 15th from 10 to 12 right here in the sanctuary. And now it's time for our land acknowledgement. Every Sunday we gather here on the homeland of Indigenous people, the Pasquosa. They are also known by the name Wenatchee, spelled with an I instead of 2 E's. It is fairly recent that land acknowledgements have been in practice, but according to my friend AI, it is part of a long-standing Indigenous tradition of recognizing relationships with the land and its original caretakers. Long ago, I saw an image that has stayed with me all these years. It looks something like this. It took me a few minutes to see that it's a silhouette of North America. It's a reminder of the following. Unless your ancestors look like this, you're probably an immigrant. And now Native Americans, especially in this political climate, are thinking, we should have built a wall. Fighting illegal immigration since 1492. The Pasquosas have been caretakers of this land for thousands of years before Europeans even knew this place existed. It's easy to forget that we are the immigrants and the occupiers and the colonizers of this land. The Pasquosa still live here, fishing, hunting, gathering roots and berries, and practicing cultural traditions. We acknowledge that their land, like that of so many other First Nations, was taken illegally because the US government broke treaty obligations and carelessly allowed and encouraged uninvited white colonizers to settle on their homeland. We stand alongside our Indigenous neighbors as they continue their traditions and seek to have their rights restored. We acknowledge our shared responsibility to sustain right relations with each other and the land, and although we don't know what we are going to do, we are committed to doing something. $10,000 in a reparations fund has been set aside. The money will be earning interest and is available to use once a committee is formed to work with the Indigenous people in our area to support their goals. And now, let us rise and body our spirit to sing our opening song, Dance Like David Danced. The words are on the screen and in your order of service. And it said Lynn is our musician, but he's added a few people. Grateful for the musical talent in this congregation. During this service, 3 people will share their beliefs and spiritual journeys, including how they found a spiritual home at CUUF and in the Unitarian Universalist faith. We hope others will find a home with us, and we do that by being welcoming. Our opening words are Welcome Home by Rachel Rott. How do we make this tender place wider? How do we stretch into a bolder welcome, a radical generosity of heart? Can we imagine ourselves the stewards and ushers, not only in this space, but into our circle of belonging? Can we commit and recommit to being accountable to one another as an anti-racist, anti-oppressive community that centers marginalized voices, that listens to those voices, especially when what they are saying is hard to hear? Can we be willing to change? When we break our agreements with one another, can we offer amends? Can we be humble and generous? There is grace enough here. There is, in this place, the possibility of healing, of repair, of making things right, within ourselves, between us, and with the wider world. There is, in this place, possibility. Each Sunday, like most UU congregations, we light a chalice. The chalice and flame symbolize our congregation gathered in principles and faith. If you are at home and have a chalice with you, please join me in lighting it. Here in the sanctuary, we will speak the lighting words in unison, which are on the screen and in the order of service. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek to share. If you are young or consider yourself so, I invite you to come forward for our story. We are going to see a video of a book that many of you are familiar with, The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. There is a lot of controversy about the meaning of this book, and indeed my own views over the years have changed. For today, I would like you to focus on the generosity of the tree and how the tree feels about giving. August, would you like to go through the arch today? Okay, with those on the aisle form an arch. And we'll see you on your way. Okay. Now go with each other to find meaning in the spirit of love that we share. Now go with each other to find meaning in the spirit of love that we share. During our coffee time, you might want to talk about the giving tree and how you feel about it, because I think it elicits a lot of feelings. This is a time in our service that we set aside with reverence to honor life events that impact us in a deep personal way. It's not a time for politics or advertisement. It is a time of reverence, of care, and of intention. We share only what we have been given permission to share. Although we are all responsible for the caring ministry of our fellowship to support each other, we also have our pastoral care team that works to coordinate the efforts of that ministry. Today, Stephanie Coe is the pastoral care representative on duty. Stephanie, could you raise your hand? Thank you. And let me get this straight, it's no longer pastoral care, is that correct? The care team, yes, thank you. So when you're speaking, please be mindful of our time and be brief. I think Reverend Soley said to give the cliff notes, not the novel. And I'll light a candle to transfer our flame as we quietly reflect on what we would like to share. What do we believe? Unitarian Universalists believe in a living tradition. Ours is not a stagnant set of beliefs. Not only are we open to change, but our UUA bylaws require a regular revision process every 15 years. Last year, there was a major overhaul. So it was done to help us evolve and address our changing world. A new Article 2 was adopted by the UUA's General Assembly after a 2-year-long process. Instead of the 7 principles, we now have 6 shared values with a covenant for each. But you will find the language of the 7 principles woven throughout. At the center of the values is love with a capital L, the power that holds us together. Each of the values includes a covenant of action because, quote, we are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love, end quote. So what are these values? Well, here they are in a graphic there. And there's an easy way that you can remember them, but I need your participation. And you might have to feel a little bit silly doing this, but it's worth it. So give me a J. J. J is for justice. Say it with me. Justice. Give me an E. E. E is for equity. Say it with me. Equity. Give me a T. T is for transformation. Say it with me. Transformation. Give me a P. P. P is for pluralism. Say it with me. Pluralism. Give me an I. I. I is for interdependence. Say it with me. Interdependence. Give me a G. G. G is for generosity. Say it with me. Generosity. Jetpig. What does it spell? Jet pig. There's our jet pig. And love is the power that makes jet pigs soar. So if you're trying to remember our values, just remember JETPIG and you can probably figure out what it stands for. This month, we are focusing on the value of generosity. The full text is, we cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. And the covenant is to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Our generosity connects us to one another in relationships of interdependence and mutuality. And today, 3 of our members will generously share their stories with you. So our first speaker is Wendy Thormahlen. She has lived in Leavenworth and in the Wenatchee area for about 43 years. She became a member of CUUF about 2 years ago. She's had a number of jobs over the years, waitressing, working in retail, among other things, but found working with kids and teaching preschool the most fulfilling. Wendy likes baking, going on walks with friends, arts and crafts, finding treasures at thrift stores and yard sales, yoga, decorating her home, doing volunteer work here, and watching true crime shows. So Wendy, come on up.
Good morning. So this is the 3rd time I've been asked to do this. I backed out the first 2 times, partly because of nerves, but also my spiritual beliefs and how I came to them are very personal to me. But I spoke with a very wise woman in my life who told me to speak my truth, that we are all more alike than different, and that we're all just bozos on the same bus. So speaking of bozos, until Rita mentioned it this morning, I completely forgot to include how I came to CUUF. But might be backwards. I'll tell you in a nutshell. I had mentioned in front of a friend I really wanted to find a church that was all-inclusive, and she told me about CUUF. So I called because churches freak me out and scare me. I didn't want to come without knowing anything. And I don't know who answered. It might have been Reverend Laura. But I said, what do you believe? And I think she read me the principles and sources. And it was like, yeah, that aligns with what I believe, you know. And so I came and went for a while and eventually stayed and became a member. When I was about 8, my whole family was baptized into a very conservative religion. And I learned some good morals and values there, and they were very family-oriented. A lot of good people there. I'm still friends with some of those people. But even when I was really young, it really bothered me how sexist the religion was. And African-American people could not hold positions in the church until the late 70s, and that really bothered me. As a teen, I remember feelings that I had that I thought were really natural and normal, and I was told they were sinful and wrong and shameful, and that, of course, bothered me. And with those natural, normal feelings, I got pregnant at 17, which was very shameful to my family and the church. It was at a time, it was on the cusp of, you know, being very shameful versus getting your own teen mom show. And, you know, I was right in the middle there, and I didn't get a show. I was sent away and told to never tell anyone and never come back. So I, after that, spent a lot of years just really self-destructing. I had a lot of baggage from trauma and issues from my past, and I just didn't know how to cope emotionally. And I developed a very serious drug addiction and was lost for a long time. You know, and I had come from a religion that didn't even allow caffeine. And so, you know, having a drug addiction was another shameful, horrible thing. I went in and out of treatment for years and psych hospitals, reached a place of real hopelessness and just didn't want to be here anymore. And I remember telling God, I don't know who you are, what you are, or if you are, but whatever you are, I don't like you. And I believe that's okay. The kind of God I believe in today, I can be honest and open with. But I thankfully ended up back in a 12-step program, willing, for the first time, really willing to do the work. And the second step is about coming to believe in a power greater than ourselves that can restore us to sanity. And they said the only requirement that that power have is that it be loving, and that I got to decide what characteristics it didn't have. And I was like, wow, don't you go to hell for that? And I don't believe in hell anymore, but it was kind of scary. But what I knew is the all-powerful male God who wanted to be worshiped and obeyed, and who tests and punishes and was to be feared and is jealous, didn't work for me. It repulsed me. It absolutely repulsed me. So with time, I came to believe in a kinder, gentler creator, kind of a Mother Earth type of energy, a nurturing and unconditionally loving source. And when I believe in prayer and meditation, and when I pray with this power, I don't have to get on my knees or bow my head. I like to tilt my head up and put my palms up. And I just feel more receptive that way, that it's, I don't know how to explain it. It just, I feel like I can be proud of who I am and connected to this source, and I don't have to, whatever. I've come to believe in miracles. I feel most connected to my higher power when I am surrounded by nature. And I believe that all forms of art are spiritual, and that the Creator is the most amazing artist of all. I'm just in awe of the beauty around us. I believe that kindness and joy and laughter are spiritual. I believe in the golden rule. I believe in integrity and being of service. I believe that we are all equal and very, very loved. I believe in my intuition and trusting my gut, that that's one of the ways I'm given guidance. I believe that we all have ancestors from the past that are watching us and guiding us and cheering us on. I believe that gratitude is powerful, and I believe that we're all connected. In the book Conversations with God, I couldn't find it. It says it better than I can, but it says, that God is like the sun, and we are all rays of that sun coming from the same source. And I like and believe that. And more than anything, I believe it is all about love. And so when I did my second step, my sponsor told me to look for God everywhere. This is the same woman that said we're all bozos. So I love her. So I want to finish with a short reading at the end of Conversations with God by Neil Diamond Walsh. It says, "Listen to me in the truth of your soul. Listen to me in the feelings of your heart. Listen to me in the quiet of your mind. Hear me everywhere. Wherever you have a question, simply know that I have answered it already. Then open your eyes to your world. My response could be in an article already published, in the sermon already written and about to be delivered, in the movie now being made, in the song just yesterday composed, in the words about to be said by a loved one, in the heart of a new friend about to be made. My truth is in the whisper of the wind, the babble of the brook, the crack of the thunder, the tap of rain. It's the feel of the earth, the fragrance of the lily, the warmth of the sun, and the pull of the moon. My truth, and your surest help in time of need, is as awesome as the night sky, and as simple and trustful as a baby's gurgle. It is as loud as a pounding heartbeat, and as quiet as a breath taken in unity with me. Call on me, therefore, wherever and whenever you are separate from the peace that I am. I will be there with truth and light and love." Thank you.
I'm so glad she didn't back out of it this time. Thanks, Wendy. Our next speaker is Don Flick. Don and his wife Barbara moved to Wenatchee 17 years ago and joined CUUF the same year, 2008. Don was originally educated as an engineer and worked in that field for 17 years, including running a purchasing operation in Hong Kong for 3 years. He then earned an MBA and ended up in corporate finance for the last 17 years of his career. Don's hobbies, which he enjoys with Barbara, include flying, hiking, snowshoeing, traveling, and until recently, skiing. Don self-describes as being obsessively curious. And when he was 20, he made his way around the world. And now Don.
Good morning. The cessation of skiing was due to the joy of living in the age of replacement parts. So I happily traded some bad knees for some good knees and said, I think I'll give up the skiing. But again, thanks, Rita. And in a way, this is coming full circle because I'm quite convinced it was Rita in 2009 asked me to do this 17 years ago. So I also have to mention again, has anybody noticed how many times Rita's name comes up in various positions of leadership around here? So I would make this officially to give Rita a hug today. In any respects, like I say, this is a story of how we came to be here, Barbara and I, but also a very intentionally personal observation of what I might call a spiritual journey. The physical description is quite easy. As Rita said, I started in Western New York, and we came out here in January of 2006, and we bought a lot in Forest Ridge in a snowstorm. And then we both retired on July 1st, 2007, a date which is commemorated in our household as Retirement Day every July 1st. And then after we retired, we built a house on that lot. We moved out here in February of 2008, so we're coming up on our 17th year, and we've loved every minute of it. So that's how we got here to Wenatchee and CUUF physically. The spiritual journey for myself, and again, I'm speaking only for myself, and this is a lot more complicated. I was born in Detroit and lived the first 13 years in a Detroit suburb. Interestingly enough, too, that suburb is in the news every election cycle tremendously, but that's another story. I was raised with a very limited basis in religion. My dad had absolutely no time for it, and my mother viewed it as essentially a box to be checked in raising children. Now, fortunately, the Canadian woman who lived down the street of Scottish descent, which meant she was Presbyterian, picked me and my sister up every Sunday and took us to Sunday school. Dearborn Woods Presbyterian Church. And so thereafter, I always identified as a Presbyterian if asked. But when we moved to Minnesota in the early 60s, I pretty well stepped away from all churches for a number of years. But my doubts and concerns about religion and what I'd been taught in Sunday school just continued to evolve, and not to evolve in a comfortable way. My first thoughts, this is like a 10-year-old, right? What does God look like? And I came to the conclusion he looked like Eric Severide. Now, approximately 30% of you know what I just said. For the other 70%, he was an old white man who was on the news every night. But that was my view of God. And then I thought, well, what is the role that God plays in my life? How can I imagine this? And again, this is a young person thing. I thought, well, it's got to be kind of like a dog with fleas. The dog kind of does what it's going to do, and every once in a while the fleas really irritate him, so he scratches, and that's a really bad outcome for the fleas, us, because that leads to great floods and plagues and things like that. So I don't say that to be offensive to anybody with that analogy. I just say it as a way that the mind of a 10-year-old guy is trying to work on this thing, and clearly not a basis for great spiritual thinking. But more meaningfully, somewhere around that 11 or 12 period of age, I remember on the news that night, there was this story of this horrific disaster. A house had burned down, and a family of 4. The mother and 2 children had been killed in the fire, and the father and the 2 sons had escaped. And as reporters do, they stuck a microphone in his face, and he went into this very long, effusive praise and gratitude for God for saving his life and those of his children. And again, as the 11 or 12-year-old mind was working, saying, so let me get this straight. This version of God gets limitless praise for everything good and gets off free for all the bad stuff. And that was the beginning of about the next 60 years of unease. But also as a part of really where I got serious about this. About the same time, too, I was developing a really great interest in war generally and World War II specifically. And that's easy, too, if you're of a certain age. And the suburb I lived in, Detroit, what'd you do during the war, Daddy, was a frequent subject of conversation. It also provided a really interesting backdrop to think about evil, because that's how this whole thing was sort of focusing down in my mind. How can I explain the existence of evil? Because in Sunday school, I had been taught that everything happens to God's purpose, everything under heaven and on earth is per some great plan. His eye is on every sparrow. So I'm trying to get this reconciliation. And then, as Rita mentioned, in 1970, wandered around the world and stopped off in places like Dachau and got off a train in Hiroshima and spent 3 days there. And that was what you might say, somewhat understatedly, transformative in this whole thought process. Barbara and I got married in 1972, and you brought your desire for travel to the marriage. So for our honeymoon, we scraped together every penny we could get, and we flew Icelandic Airlines to Europe, and we picked up the Volkswagen Beetle we had bought, and we proceeded to travel across Europe, put 10,000 miles on it. We still have the sleeping bag and tent that we had. That was a good buy, too. That was REI. Good stuff. That's an ad for REI, by the way. But anyways, on our honeymoon, of course, we visited Auschwitz. Who doesn't visit Auschwitz on their honeymoon? And that was no less transformative than the visit to Hiroshima. So by this time, my question really was very simple. If God really is operating super details of everything in this world and everything is per some plan, then I had to get a different view. Didn't work for me. It works for many others. And then I ran across this statement, quick side story too. And retirement was a chance to do a lot of reading. And I remember one time standing in the Wenatchee Library when it seemed quite crowded. And the librarian called out, "Who wanted the book, The God Delusion?" And I swear to God, every head in the library turned and looked at me. We talk about quiet courage, right? I got the book. But anyways, then I ran into, again, trying to square this idea of this absolutely loving God with the Beatitudes. And I ran into this line of logic that's attributed to Epicurus. So leave it to the Greeks, right? For creating lines of logic. But he asked the following question. If God is able to prevent evil, but unwilling, then he's malevolent. If God is willing but unable, then he's not omnipotent. If he's both willing and able, then whence cometh evil? And if he's neither willing nor able, then why call him God? So I thought that was a pretty fair way of summarizing kind of where my brain was working. So I've devoted myself to posing this line of questioning to numerous individuals, as many as I could who had theological credentials. And virtually all of them had an answer that worked for them, and none of those answers worked for me. Fast forward. Okay, then we had children. Okay, so we then decided we needed to provide a religious identity for our children. So I took an intermission from my doubts for a while. And we became members of a mainline Presbyterian church in Pittsford, New York. At the time, it had like 1,500 members. And it was not a bad choice for us because it was light on dogma. It was light on the darkness of the Old Testament and things like that. provided a way for our children to go to Sunday school and learn the Bible stories. History repeats itself. And I even served as a deacon there for a while, but I also was immersed in the history. The cornerstone of that sanctuary was laid when Abraham Lincoln was president, replacing the church building that had been created in 1803 when the congregation, so I just love the sense of history there. But then we moved out here in search of new beginnings. So I said, well, maybe we ought to look for a Presbyterian church. And Barbara said something like, we're looking for new beginnings. And she said, how about the Unitarians? And I even remembered my social studies teacher from high school, who at one time, he and I used to have discussions about this. And he said, you got to check out the Unitarians. So we did. So in August of 2008, we came to our first service. Now, at First Presbyterian Church of Pittsford, you put on a suit. And you came and sat in this immense sanctuary with hundreds of other people. So we come out here in August of 2008, and there's guys in Hawaiian shirts, wearing shorts and sandals. So to paraphrase slightly, guess we're not in Kansas anymore. But I also found a spiritual home here. And Wendy's comments reminded me too, virtually everybody, that's perhaps a slight overstatement, many of us. And in the theme of immigration, many of us here are immigrants from other religious backgrounds. And we have all found a home here. And I've always welcomed that home. It's a chance where I can do my intellectual wanderings and talk to people about things that others would find very uncomfortable. I truly believe there's more fascinating people per square foot here than any place I've lived in my life. As some of you can say, I've spent as a minor hobby inviting people to have lunch or breakfast and tell me their backstory. And I have never been anything less than enthralled with what has come out of those experiences. Just amazing. So, this is my answer. What do I believe? Well, one, I believe all happiness is relational. Period. I believe that I will eventually find out what happens when I die, which I hope lies sometime in a more distant future. But in the meantime, I'm uncomfortable not knowing. I am very comfortable, I misspoke. I am very comfortable with not having that knowledge because there's a full life to live here. And as the great and underappreciated philosopher Gandalf the Grey, later reincarnated as Gandalf the White, said, the only true decision we get to make is how we spend this brief span we've been given. So I believe I should wake up every day and just be happy with the sheer fact that there's another day ahead of me. And the most important task to treasure every day is time with Barbara and family, and the fact that we get to live in this amazing place. So thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Don. Well, our next speaker is Roxanne Harrison, and Roxanne has COVID, so she is going to be joining us via Zoom. So Darius can set that up while I'm introducing her. So Roxanne and her husband, John, live between Monitor and Kashmir in a house surrounded by orchards. They moved here 5.5 years ago from Vancouver, Washington, but Roxanne has lived many places, including Japan. She was born in Wenatchee, moved away when she was very young, but after many years returned and attended Eastmont High School, where she graduated in 1985. Roxanne and John started attending CUUF about 5.5 years ago. Then COVID hit before they could really get to know people. They started attending again when services switched back to in-person gatherings. Roxanne is a middle school teacher at Pinnacles Prep, a charter school in Wenatchee. Her hobbies include spending time with her 6 kids and 7 grandchildren, camping, reading, and caring for pets. Now, you aren't expected to bow down, but you do need to know that Roxanne and John are royalty this year. They have been selected as this year's May Queen and May King for the pagan group they are members of in the Portland, Vancouver area. And now Roxanne.
Hello, can you hear me? Oh, I hope so. I didn't really want to be sick for this. I was asked one other time by Rita to do this, and I said that yes, I would, but I couldn't that weekend. I was going to be out of town. So I've been really excited to do this and to share, and now I'm sick and I can't talk very well. And here it is. Um, One of the reasons that I'm at CUUF and that I was drawn to it is just exactly uh, listening to the other speakers today and hearing their stories. That is exactly why I'm here. All right, so I will read this to you. This I believe. I remember when I was about 6 years old, eating some raspberries from the bushes at my cousin's house. As I picked and ate each raspberry, I remember their juicy deliciousness, and most of all, I remember sending an appreciative thank you in thought to each berry and each bush. They are my friends. The energy of life and existence exudes from the planet and all that is on it, from the moon, from the sun, from the stars, from the beyond, and from all the spaces betwixt and between, and from this cat. Do I believe I existed before this particular state of awareness? I do believe my energy existed and that my awareness was different, yet connected and aware. Do I believe I will exist after this? Yes, absolutely. And I feel that I have connected significantly with those that have gone beyond in many ways. In this place, in this existence, I feel, I see, and I sense connection with the energy network, both near and also distant. When I lived in Japan, I felt the connection, the energy, and the resonance more intensely in everything, everywhere. It was surprising, really. I believe that intensity was due to the fact that more people actively observed and cultivated that awareness. So the whole energy network was more aware, more alert, more vibrant. Not only did I feel it, but I felt more observed by the trees, the forest, the air, the waterfalls, the dragonflies, the birds, the rocks, the leaves, and the very planet itself. That elevated experience of resonant connection changed my life. I believe that while I may sometimes appear to be by myself, alone, that I am always connected with all the elements, all the animals, all of the people, with all of the rocks, all of the trees, the vast ocean, each waterfall and each plant and each bit of energy, even to each particle of substance, that which makes up atoms and molecules. I believe the resonance of existence and connection is the motion and dance that all things do in the spaces between those particles, the spaces between each element, between each of us, the space between planets, moons, stars, suns, and beyond. I believe this dance is what makes existence meaningful and connected. I believe this connection goes beyond time, with those who are in the now, those who have been in this place and awareness before us, and those yet to come. I believe there's a flow of that energy in existence. I believe that kindness and respect add to the joyful resonance of that connected network. I believe that anger, selfishness, and greed cause the network to vibrate in less pleasant and less healthy ways. I believe that we can send out strong energy into the connected network that can have a significant impact. I truly believe that we are linked together through the science and nature principles of wave interactions, gravitational forces, forces of weather and climate, and literal elemental connections. In the periodic table, each element has a specific resonant frequency. This is what is within us, around us, between us, and makes up the entirety of all that we know. These resonating frequencies interact with each other. We are literally a part of this network of resonating frequencies. We are part of an immense, amazing energy web. Why did I become a part of CUUF? I'm going to say, Wendy, I'm like you. I forgot until the last minute that this was even part of what I was supposed to say. So um, I I made some notes while you were talking. I have been through a long spiritual journey to get where I am today, which circles back to when I thanked the raspberry bushes for joyfully sharing delicious energy with me. A number of years ago, I left a very prescriptive religion when I stopped trying to fit my actual beliefs and values into their specific box. I believe that diversity of beliefs is joyful and powerful. In seeking to join a group like CUUF, I believe that energies gather and connect and become stronger together. Just like the table of elements each has their own resonant frequency, we all resonate with our own collection of frequencies. I believe we blend and share our multitudinous frequencies into something beautiful, powerful, and impactful. There's a great power in shared intentional service and kindness. This I believe.
Thank you, Roxanne. Thank you to Wendy, Dawn, and Roxanne for generously sharing their beliefs and their personal spiritual journeys. If you would like to share yours at a future date, just let me know after the service. Well, our service is going a little longer today. I hope you don't mind because I think it was worth it. But it's time for our offertory. There are many ways to be generous in our congregation. You can give your time, share your skills, your talents to sustain our church home. If you're feeling the call to get more involved, we would love to have you join us. Just talk to a board member after the church. Raise your hand if you're a board member, so look around. The other way to be generous is, of course, with your financial support, because it takes money to keep our doors open, to provide ministry, to pay our employees. But regardless of how you give or the amount, it is appreciated. Joyfully sharing our gifts and strengths and service to the greater good is one way we create the beloved community. We live these values in abundance, and we will now receive the offering. Gathering with gratitude for camaraderie, shared wisdom, goodwill, and support that we extend to each other within this community. May we continue to bless each other with these gifts, and may we reflect those blessings back out into the world as we minister to those around us. And as we go forth, let us remember to be generous. And before we extinguish our chalice, just a reminder, we're going to have a meeting at noon. That's coming up pretty soon. The most important thing to remember and the hardest thing is when we call the meeting, conversations need to come to a close because we can't hear if we don't do that. Okay, and now we'll extinguish the chalice. The words are in your printed order of service or on the screen. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And now it's our tradition to form a closing circle, hold hands, and sing our closing song.
Until we meet again.